Hi, I'm Barry Rushton and welcome to Speak Up, the television arm of Freemasonry throughout New Zealand. We have a great show for you tonight. Our special guest is David Mace, a past Grand Master and an officer of the Order of New Zealand. I'll be speaking with Carl Treadwell, who is a past Master of Lodge Takapuna on the North Shore, and I'll introduce you to Graeme Houston, who will be covering Freemasons from history. David Mace, it is absolutely fabulous to have you here on the first show of Speak Up. And it's terrific for a couple of reasons. One, because I have heard you speak on a number of occasions. You know, and every time you do speak about something, it's always fascinating. And the second thing is that in your life, it appears that you've done so many interesting things in so many different countries around the world, but your basic profession is accountancy, and it never seems that those two words go into the same sentence, excitement and accountancy. They never seem to be together, but somehow you've done it. And it's been a wonderful life that you've had so far, isn't it? Indeed.
Well, I started out to be a carpenter. All my brothers are carpenters, my father's a carpenter, and I failed. And so inevitably I learned how to be an accountant, and that's how life started out, as a failed carpenter.
But you became, of course, a member of Ernst & Young's, right, and a senior partner in that firm, right, and
Correct.
Spent a number of years in different locations.
Yes.
The one that interests me the most, of course, is your time in Hong Kong.
Right.
There's a number of things that I'd love to talk to you about in Hong Kong, you know, and so you got there, what, in the early 80s? Or
Early 80s,
early
at
80s?
the time when there was a lot of confusion around the handover.
Yeah. So it must have been quite interesting times when you got there in the 80s and
Well,
mid-80s.
when I first got there, of course, we were plunged into this huge corporate collapse of carrion, and there were several people that had disappeared, had been murdered, and for the first 2 or 3 years, I had Gurkha guards who didn't come up to my belt, sort of trailing me.
Is that true?
My family was still back in New Zealand, but I didn't tell them all about the Gurkha guards.
Well, I wanted to ask you about this because it was a huge thing at the time. In fact, it was the biggest corporate bankruptcy in the world, I think, at the time, wasn't it?
At the time.
And the whole Karen group, isn't it? It was started by
Carrion. Yes.
By a chap called George Tan, wasn't it?
Correct.
I believe, right?
Correct.
And he was really not, from what I know, he was really not a banker or any kind, really. But somehow he managed to cobble together 998 million Hong Kong dollars and brought a building there, which is now the Bank of America, I believe, the same one area, in the January of 1980.
That's correct.
And then April 1980, which was only 3 months later, sold it for 1.65 billion Hong Kong dollars. Now, that's when people said, gee, hold on a minute, that doesn't sound right.
Yes. He played the stock exchange. It's often said unkindly that what happens with the stock exchange, you start a rumour at 10 o'clock, people buy or you sell the shares, and after lunch you dispose of the rumour. So there's been, today of course it's tightly controlled by the Securities Commission, but there was back in those days huge amount of speculation.
Right, and you're quite right, there were murders, there were people who went missing. It was really a stack of cards that sort of tumbled down in the end.
Yes,
correct?
Well what happened was they brought the internal auditor from Bank Bhumiputra to check what was going on. So he came in and very quickly found that there were things that ought not to be doing.
Yeah.
So some of the associates decided to rough him up. So he was staying at the Regent Hotel, which at the time, and even today, is one of the top hotels. And he was in the shower. And when this fellow was sent to rough him up, he actually meant to sort of throttle him or lose his breath, but not to kill him. Unfortunately, the poor internal auditor collapsed and slipped, and next minute he found that there was a dead body in the shower.
Wow.
So what did he do? He walked out of the Regent Hotel and went to many of the alleyways which we all frequent every time people visit, and he bought a big suitcase. He took it back to the room and filled the suitcase with this body.
Really?
He struggled to move the suitcase, but these wonderful regent boys all rushed up. And in the end, 6 of them ended by carrying and taking the suitcase, put it in the boot of the taxi, and he took it out to a banana plantation and dumped it, the thing. But of course, in the body it was wrapped in a Regent Road, so you didn't need to be chief inspector to work out where it had come from.
That's incredible. So when this collapse happened, you were appointed, court appointed.
We were appointed by the court in Hong Kong,
right.
And I was appointed one of the 3 liquidators of that, and so we were court officers. And what happened was, with my appointment, I was quite well known to several of the Australian partners, and they rang me at 1 o'clock in the morning. The Mace family had just come back from a wonderful sabbatical at Yosemite Park. I took the call, and I was on Cathay flight to Hong Kong at 8 a.m. in the morning.
Wow. In 1949, back in 1949, there were a number of Chinese people who actually left China after those the socialist bracket capitalism around it and came into Hong Kong.
Correct.
I think that continued on because I believe that you also had a great hand in setting up the Helping Hands for Hong Kong for people, and that's correct.
Correct, yes. It was an amazing organisation because at that time those people fled and there was nowhere for them to go.
Yeah.
Some of them had swum, many got drowned, and it was a horrific flight out of China. Right. And what happened was these people came, and then in those days a group of us saw that these people were living in cages. At the same time, the Hong Kong government was on an amazing building program, and they were completing, can you believe this, a small apartment every 15 minutes.
Wow, Auckland City needs those kind of people.
Absolutely. So what we did in Helping Hand, and the Chinese philanthropy, their generosity is unbelievable.
Wow.
And I went to a number of friends and colleagues, and in particular sought the help of 2 Hong Kong Chinese billionaires, both of whom have quite exotic properties in New Zealand, and they visit occasionally to New Zealand, and I spend time with them. But they helped fund with hundreds of millions of Hong Kong dollars, and we bought the bottom 3 floors of many of these housing estates and put the people into it.
Fantastic. And that Helping Hands
and that
organisation
still goes today. And
true.
Now, with the result of the wealthiest racing club in the world,
right.
the Hong Kong, or as it was then, the Royal Hong Kong Jockey Club, they funded us to help build these, buy these properties, and we housed hundreds and hundreds of people out of these cages.
Which is fantastic. Speaking about Freemasonry in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Now, I guess, did the Chinese have an opinion about Freemasonry there?
Well, very, very amusing during the time that I was involved in the handover, because in fact, not a lot of people are aware, the handover failed. It stopped, and that's not very widely known. And it stopped because the British wanted to have external judges on the Court of Final Appeal, because they were concerned that the people in Stanley Prison who were serving a life sentence for murder would be taken out, shot, and the family, of course, in China has to pay $1 for the bullet. So they got very anxious, and the Chinese said, no, we're not going to bow to you, and the English said, right. So the whole thing came to a grinding halt. So the 48 business chambers got together, and of course the Americans said, the Chinese won't believe us. The British said, we're conflicted. And I was sitting at the back of the room, and the Belgian ambassador stood up and said, "Oh, get that tall Kiwi from New Zealand." So I was appointed along with the brother-in-law of one of the Chinese taipans in Hong Kong, and we went up to the People's Hall of the Public and met Zhu Rongji.
Right.
And we said, look, we're apolitical, we don't want to enter into the argument, but do you realise what it will do to the wealth of Hong Kong? Oh, well, he said, and of course he spoke beautiful English, but he spoke in Mandarin through interpreters. He said, well, if the Brits want that, they can have it. So 10 minutes later we left with an agreement.
Untouched.
And then following that, the Chinese came to me and said, would I go on their side during the handover? And I played some small role, but I never told them my mother was English.
Now, again, in 1996, I think you retired from
Ernst
and Young. But then you were appointed, I believe, as the Commissioner for the UN compensation, right?
Correct.
For the Gulf War
yes.
injury stuff.
Yeah.
Now, they were huge claims, weren't they?
They
were
were
330 billion or something.
$333 billion in total.
Right.
And I was acting in one of the engineering divisions, which included the Bekmi Dam, where the Kurds blew it up during the war.
You know, David, this is that life in Hong Kong must have been, and other parts of the world must have been fascinating. I mean, I know you can probably talk for another 4 or 5 hours, and we'd love it as well. But let me just finish off on this, if I can. You came into Freemasonry, I think it was about 1963, I think it was, right? What was the thing? And I think you were only about 22 or 23 at that stage.
Yes, 21.
So what attracted you to Freemasonry at that stage?
Well, I received huge encouragement from my father. His father, my great-grandfather, my grandfather had all had experience with Freemasonry, and it was something I joined and found a huge friendship amongst people of my age, and enjoyed it immensely.
Right.
I think too, having been a failed carpenter and learning in the accounting world, if you want to get somewhere, you've got to be able to articulate, you've got to have confidence on your feet.
Right.
And that's what Freemasonry initially taught me as a very young man. But I was incredibly privileged to have a very supportive wife who encouraged me.
Mrs. Mace, right?
Indeed.
You know, Freemasonry has been, when I say good to you, I mean, you've done so much service to the community, and that's why you were awarded in 2011, I think it was, the Officer of the Order of New Zealand Merit.
Correct.
But also, as people may know, that you are a past Grand Master, so you reached the top of Freemasonry New Zealand. If there was one thing that you would say to a person, maybe a person looking here, that might say, oh, I'm a bit interested about Freemasonry, might think about joining a man, what was the one or two things you would say to that person about considering to be a Freemason?
I think you mix with good people. It's not an organisation you join to get any benefit out of, but it gives you a sense of your own self-worth and the ability to help other people in the community.
Great. David, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Look forward to seeing you again. Okay? Thank you again, my friend. Carl Treadwell, lovely to see you. Welcome to the first show of Speak Up. Now, look, I know what it is you do in Freemasonry because we've been friends for a long time. Tell our viewers what your role is in the Freemason situation in New Zealand today.
Right. Thanks, Barry. It's great to see you again. As Barry said, my name's Carl, and I've been in Freemasonry for about 15 years now. I'm a past master of Lodge Takapuna, number 202. And has now been amalgamated with another lodge, Albany, number 404. Now I'm the past master of Lodge Albany, Takapuna, number 202.
Yeah. It's a great lodge too, isn't it? I mean, what tends to happen, and you can back me up if I'm not correct, that most of the time, especially around the suburbs of any large city, there'd be a number of lodges that were created in their individual suburb. But then due to maintenance, due to sort of insurance costs, a lot of lodges said, well, this is silly, we're not making good effective use of our buildings. So then they tend to merge and work in the one. And then they tend to, like you've done in your lodge, actually have a commercial building that help keeps the costs of everything down, which is a fabulous idea, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Haven't really come to talk about that today. What I have come to talk, and why I love you being on the show, because I know that you are the main driver behind the community project that you have done under, I think it was started with Takapuna, but it's certainly under now Albany Takapuna, and that's the Foster Hope, right? I want you to tell us a little bit more about that, because it's such a great charity. I know there's lots of charities out there, but this is a great one.
When I became master, I decided that I would like to really get into a charity and support a charity with my lodge, and I never realised how many charities there were on the charity's website. It was incredible. But a lot of the charities get funding from government and large corporations, etc. And it was very difficult for me to find one that resonates with me. It wasn't until I dropped off some pajamas to Foster Hope, who would have a pajama drive every June, and we dropped off some pajamas, my wife and I, and I thought, why don't I approach Foster Hope?
Right.
And it turns out that they didn't have any funding at the time, and I said, well, this is what we can offer you.
What I think a lot of people don't realise is that just how many times children are perhaps plucked out of a situation that's beyond their control, maybe in the middle of the night, it may be sort of a domestic dispute, it could be anything, right? And suddenly these kids are just plucked from something that they know, almost with nothing, right? And so it's just more than pajamas, isn't it? I mean, it's something that goes on, right? Tell me more.
Absolutely. Foster Hope is an awesome charity. Basically, they have packing days. And they have a lot of items that are donated by corporates and the community. And we get together on 2 days in the year, in March and September. And we have a little system.
Yeah, as you would.
And we have about 50 to 70 community members, including lodge members from the district and further afield. And we pack age-related items in backpacks for children from 0 to 18. Right. And it seems like a big mission, but we've got it down packed. And
so it's like a little conveyor belt.
It
right?
is,
and everybody
absolutely,
goes along and fixes it.
Absolutely.
Now, so how do these kids or people actually get the actual satchel? What happens? What goes on there?
Well, once we've packed the backpacks, now we can actually put them into bags and we can distribute them to the relevant centres for distribution almost immediately to children in care.
The second thing that happened, if I remember rightly, because you and I were part of this little thing, is that there's another organisation that's sort of around them as well, or not part of them necessarily, but with them.
Yes.
And that's called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, right?
That's correct, yes.
And that's, well, you tell me more about it.
Well, the packing days were going so well, and I wanted to do something really special, and we organised a black tie dinner. And we had a silent auction of various items. We had Amanda Gillies was a guest speaker, and it was just an awesome night. We had decorations. It was a full house. We had music, and it was just amazing. And the lodges in the district of the North Shore raised $15,000 on the night.
And so what that money goes for, again, correct me if I'm incorrect, is that these grandparents raising grandkids, they've already raised kids themselves, right? And now they're forced, for whatever reason, to bring up their grandchildren. So it becomes, again, another 24/7 life for them.
Absolutely.
So consequently, this charity allows them to send the children away for a week to a camp.
Yes.
At least give the grandparents a chance to go to the movies or get a coffee or go to the park by themselves, which I think is just fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. Foster Hope have another arm called Foster Camps. So they, with the money raised, which is more than the 15,000, because we had a donation from the Freemasons charity.
So your lodge is going from strength to strength.
Yes, it is.
If a young bloke came up to you and said, "Hey, Freemasonry, I'm thinking about doing something," what would you say? I mean, what do you think is giving you that you know that he might get as well?
I think a good idea is to actually come in and talk to someone who is a Freemason.
Yeah.
You know, seek out the lodge that's near you.
If you want to. Yeah.
If you want to, absolutely. And just see if it fits you.
Right.
Like most things, things fits this person, but not that person. But you won't know until you find out.
Exactly.
And it's been a great choice for me in many aspects. My family, my work, my community, and
well, I know that you're respected in our district a lot. So thanks for coming for today. It's been terrific having you, Carl.
Thanks very much,
and
Barry.
Same with your lodge. Please pass on the best from myself anyway to your lodge and tell them to keep up the great work.
I will.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very
See
much.
you.
Cheers.
Now we come to that part of the program when it's my pleasure to introduce to you a colleague of mine who will be a regular on the show, Graeme. Nice to see you, Graeme.
Thank you, Barry.
Nice to have you on board.
Nice to be
mate.
here.
Graham's in charge of this wonderful little segment where he looks back in history and looks, and not only in history, but in even current history and even present time, and finds the people, some of the people in the world who have been Freemasons, who have also been famous people, who have done tremendous things. And I know you've got a couple of specials up in your back sleeve, haven't you?
Certainly have,
Who are we
Barry.
going to talk about today, Graeme?
Barry, we're going to talk about a favourite of mine, John Wayne.
Oh, I knew you were a Western bloke.
I'm Western Mo. Let me go back a little bit about John Wayne, because he wasn't always John Wayne.
That's right.
John Wayne used to be Marion Morrison.
Yeah.
And it's a name that's not well known among a lot of people, but the name John Wayne certainly is. So we'll talk about it is John Wayne.
Imagine being called Marion. I'd want to change too, wouldn't you?
Well, I'd want to change. But the interesting thing was, he joined a lodge with Marion in the name.
Wow.
Yeah, it did. So John Wayne was his stage name, and it's a name that he had for most of his life. To most people, and particularly males, he epitomised rugged masculinity, a determination, an individualism. He had the walk.
The swagger.
He had the talk.
Yeah.
He had the voice, distinctive voice, and he had the height. And that seemed to make him the all-round American icon.
Now, he was also known by another name too, wasn't he? I mean, John Wayne, you know John, but he got a nickname, didn't he, basically?
He got the nickname the Duke.
The Duke, yeah.
And it's interesting where that came from. The family moved from Iowa down to California, and moved a couple of times in California, and settling in Glendale, where his father was a pharmacist. And he went to young kid, went to school, and he used to go to school every day past one particular place. He used to have this dog with him, this big Ayrshire terrier, big dog. And apparently the dog and John were never separated. And where the dog went, John went, and vice versa. When he passed the local fire station, one of the local firemen always used to call out, good morning to them, and he'd call to the dog first, and the dog's name was Duke. And he'd call out, good morning, Duke, and he'd refer to John as Little Duke.
Little Duke, yeah.
And so he'd call him Little Duke. Now, story goes that he preferred the name Duke to Marion, as we've already said. Why would we like a name called Marion? And the name stuck. And he was known as the Duke, from that day forward. Now, he was very much an anti-communist. He was a conservative Republican, and he was very vocal about a lot of those things. And he was part of the American film industry's group that they put together to promote the American ideal. And he was a member of the John Birch Society, which was very anti-communist, and it was also very conservative, a Republican conservative. And although he said in one interview that when he was at college that he actually was a socialist, and he admitted to voting for the Democratic President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1924, and also was a great admirer of the Democratic President Harry S. Truman. But it seems in later life he changed and became more conservative in his ways. And it's in one of the quotes that is often said about him, which sort of illustrated the patriotism of the guy. He says, "Sure, I wave the American flag. Do you know a better flag to wave? Sure, I love my country with all its faults, but I'm not ashamed of it. Never have been, and never will be."
We all could do with a bit of that sort of
Very much
patriotism
so.
even in our own country.
Yeah.
There was something about him as well, if I remember rightly, that we didn't have it in New Zealand, and I don't know any other places that did, but there was an order of de Malloy, I think it was, and it was for young people between 12 and 21 or 22, if I remember rightly, and he was a member of that even way back in those early days.
Yeah, he was a member of that order. The order was formed in 1919 by Frank Land, and with 9 young fellas. 9 young boys, and they set this up for young men between the ages of, as you said, 12 and 21. The idea was to promote leadership, to help them develop leadership, not by just seeing other people's in leadership roles, but by doing it. And they would run their own organisation, run their own activities, own community service, own charitable works. And that grew to spread across many countries in the world, and they have had over 3 million people. And there's been a number of very prominent people that have come through that organ. Besides John Wayne.
Many presidents of the United States.
Yes.
Do you know that it was named after the actual...
Yes.
After Jacques.
Jacques de Molay,
Right,
who was the last Grand Master of the Templars and was burnt at the stake of the Knights Templar.
That's a story in and of itself, but we'll
That's
cover that one.
Another story, and we'll cover that.
So he was a committed Freemason, was he? And there's a picture of him in the history books of John Wayne, of Duke, being initiated with his apron and all the others around it. A wonderful. They must have been thinking, "Wow, John Wayne's here. He's part of us," you know.
Well, evidently he was very understated when he would go to Lodge, that he never advertised the fact that he was going, and often would never say, "Yes, I'll be attending," because he wanted to go to Lodge and be with people who were there for the right reason, rather than everybody go along because John Wayne was there.
Great.
And so he was quite understated in that way. Now the interesting thing was the records do show that he was initiated on 9th of July 1970, passed on the 10th of July 1970, and raised on the 11th of July 1970. But that seems to be something Americans do, is that they push these degrees together.
His manager might have said, "Look, you've got a weekend.
Yes.
Do it Friday, do it Saturday, do it Sunday, and we're out of here again." They've got a movie starting on Tuesday or something.
Possibly something like that. So he was a Shriner, and he was involved with a lot of the fundraising and the charitable works of the organisation. Right. So he was a very, very much a committed man. Now, there's an interesting story about John Wayne. Such was his popularity and such was his fame throughout America, and a group of wealthy Texans backers approached him to run for national office, to run for president. And he jokingly said, no, he could never see the American public voting for an actor in the White House. But as history shows, that changed when Ronald Reagan
One of the
came.
best presidents too, if I do may say, you know.
Yes. Now, it may have been joking, but the story goes that it wasn't a joke to one particular person, and that was the leader of Russia, Joseph Stalin. Although he liked the John Wayne movies, he did not like John Wayne's anti-communistic stands and he made that film in 1952, Big Jim McLean, to support the anti-communist stance. And he issued an assassination order against John Wayne.
Wow.
Unfortunately for Stalin, he died before the assassination could be carried out. Now, a number of years later, when Khrushchev was the leader of Russia, on a trip to America, he met John Wayne and spoke to John Wayne and told him that he personally rescinded the assassination order on John
Wonderful.
Wayne. Yeah.
Graham, that's fantastic information, mate. Thank you for that. But it's great to see, you know, that this kind of, there's stories out there amongst a lot of people. I believe next week you've got someone special for us too.
Got something special going back a long way in history, and it's covering a period which is, I find, fascinating in the life. And I'll
Thank
talk
you, mate.
Thank you, Barry.
Look forward to seeing you next week,
you.
okay? Thank you very much. See you, mate. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for joining us. We've had a great time. Our special guests have been superb. If you would like to know a little bit more about Freemasonry, feel free to go to the Grand Lodge website, which is www.freemasonsnz.org. Next week, our special guest is a master craftsman in furniture making. You won't want to miss that one. So, until I see you again, have a great week.